Welcome in everyone to a very special episode of American Joyride with Outkick. We are very excited today to be joined by Brad Thomas. He's a rock musician. He's a former Army operator, and he's an all-around really nice guy. So Brad, we spoke before. This is the first time you're on American Joyride, so thanks.
Yeah, man. Thanks for having me. I'm also a Pisces. Yeah, there's other things we can add to the list of things that I am and probably things that I am not. So yeah, but appreciate you having me on, dude. I had a great time. Every time we've chatted, I have a great time.
Well, hey, I can't wait for the audience to introduce you. It's kind of a new audience from where we were last time, and that's why I wanted to have you back. And one of the things that we talked about at length last time was your experience as a veteran of the Battle of Mogadishu, commonly known as Black Hawk Down. The anniversary was really recently, 29-year anniversary. And I'm just curious for you, now that you're 29 years removed from what happened in Somalia, do you think about it differently? Do you view it differently? Has time changed your perception of it? Or do you kind of feel the same way you felt about it as you did at the time in 1993?
Interesting that you bring that up, because I feel like my perspective has, I won't say it's changed completely. Like I still have the same outlook on the battle. It still feels the same. The visual things that I remember and just the feelings of, fear, despair, all of that stuff still ring very true. So in that aspect, it's very much the same. But was talking with one of the main Ranger characters in the movie, Black Hawk Down, Matt Eversman, the other day. And I said, it's almost more harrowing now than it was then. Like, we didn't know what we were doing from minute to minute. And knowing now what we actually did, what we accomplished. And, like if I had known all of the catastrophic stuff that had happened that day while I was riding around, doing stuff, I probably would have had a different, an even different outcome or aspect or looking back on it. So absolutely. And everybody that I've talked to about it, recently as the other, last week was the anniversary, kind of felt the same way.
That's incredible to hear. And I know that you were, a young man at the time in your early 20s, I believe. Correct me if I'm wrong on that.
Yeah.
I'm 30 now, so you were significantly younger than me at the time when you were sent over to stop a genocide. And could you kind of just brief the audience on how was the mission explained to you guys? Like, what was the goal? Why were you going?
This is so one thing I want to mention is I'm starting a new project. It's not going to take place at band. That's all cranking up and getting ready to drop the second album and everything else. But this other project is going to kind of come in a Reader's Digest, kind of explanation of what it is. It's all of the things behind the story. It's all of the human aspect of Black Hawk Down. The intent is that it releases next year just before the 30th anniversary. And everybody that's involved with it, I mean, A-list cast of people that's involved with it. So it really is kind of intended to ask a lot of these questions, talk about a lot of these things, because most of us don't really know exactly how things came to be. How did B Company get picked to be the Ranger Company? It's delving into a lot of those kinds of questions, not a war story. There I was killing people, that type of thing, but really kind of getting into, and then the aftermath and all of the things that came after the fact. So I didn't know this, but this is an example of something that I learned in talking with the people that are going to be a part of this project. There was a Ranger company from 1st Ranger Battalion that was preparing for the better part of a month or something. And then literally they got stood down. Hey, you guys aren't doing it. Somebody else is doing it. And we were involved in a joint readiness exercise in Fort Bliss, Texas, and, heard about it one day. It was kind of like, hey, there's something going on. And within another day or two, it became a more formal platoon leadership called us in and said, hey, there's this thing going on in Somalia and the capital of Mogadishu, and they're, basically clans battling over this military aid and humanitarian aid that's being sent to help the people of Somalia. And they're killing American UN workers, they're killing other UN workers, and we may go do something, to disrupt that from happening so that the aid can get to the right people. And that was really it. Once we got closer, and then once we got over there, there was probably more of an intel brief on, hey, here's who we're after, and here's how this is going to work, and things like that. But really, we were kind of in the blind and had no idea that even another Ranger company was preparing for, more than a month while we're out doing our thing. I don't even know if that was by design, It's like, you don't really know what you don't know.
So is this special project you're going to be doing, is it a book? Is it a documentary? What's the format of it?
That was, initially it was kind of like, what's the medium? How do I get out this story and all of these stories? I don't want to write a book. And I have, literary agent, people that I could contact and make something happen. Absolutely. But I don't have the time nor desire to do that, even with a ghostwriter. So that kind of led me to the next thing. Do I try and get involved with someone like Netflix and put something out, through that mechanism? And ideally, I think that's, something that I would like to do. I want to maintain ownership of this. I don't want someone else to come in and say, okay, now we want you to explore an angle that, you don't want to explore. Second part of that is I want this to be a serial. Like, it's something that the next plan is to do 9/11 and go into the same kind of aspects of everything that we're talking about. We could do another one. And so it would be seasons, and, not just looking at Black Hawk Down, and this is the Black Hawk Down podcast or whatever it ends up being. Right now I've got it being able to launch, so it will be a podcast format initially with a video component to it. It's going to launch off of, and I'm not at liberty to say whose podcast, but it's going to launch off of somebody that's got a pretty decent following. So it's immediately going to go out to, hundreds of thousands of people. So from there, it'll get turned into its own channel, and whatever happens. But that's kind of the intent of everything.
Wow, that's awesome. And this is news. I did not know this. The viewers, I want to this is awesome though. Good for you, Brad. That's going to be sick, and I will definitely be looking out for that. That's really incredible, and I hope you get a ton of viewers and a ton of success.
I have no desire, it had no desire to be a podcast host. Like, that's not my intent. But just in having conversations, so I'll have a co-host, and me and this guy were Ranger buddies, and he's just got an amazing sense of humor. So there's a, comedic aspect to it. And kind of the final component to the whole thing is that everybody has little artifacts. Everybody's got a little, like, these are the keepsakes that I have. Here are some of the pictures that I've got. And, more recently, like within the last 6 months, I've seen several pictures that I'm in that I haven't seen for 29 years. And so I feel like, from people that were involved in the battle to people that weren't involved in the battle, how Hollywood basically took people, real people, and had them do things that they didn't do in the battle. I understand Hollywood's need to, all right, we've got to condense 120 characters into maybe 6, and we've got a 90-minute format, and, here's how that happens. But there are people that were negatively impacted by Hollywood taking their name, likeness, and everything else and making them do things that they didn't do. And, 29 years later, what are the ramifications from that? The awards upgrade ceremony, sorry, I'm long-winded here. The awards upgrade ceremony that happened last year in October. Imagine being a person that was in the battle. I got a Valorous award for my participation in what I did. And imagine everybody and their brother asking you, hey, did you get upgraded? Did you get upgraded? Did you do something more significant, whatever it might be, and having to tell them no. And then here I am, 50-something-year-old man, feeling like a shitbag because, like, no, I'm not getting upgraded. I didn't do anything, It's 29 years later, and that stuff is still rattling around. I didn't expect to get upgraded. I didn't want to be upgraded, but that's just an example. And really, the kind of final part of the project is it's meant to be an example to guys that have been serving at wartime for the last 21 years to say, here's something that happened 30 years ago, and we're still dealing with after effects, and it's not necessarily something that is so horrible now 29 years later, but there are still things that rattle around in your brain and get you angry and upset and emotional about, something that happened that long ago.
Well, let me ask you this, and then I'll hop back to a different Black Hawk Down thing. But you mentioned the movie, and I can tell that you're very passionate about the situation you're explaining. I think you told me you've seen the movie one time, right?
Yeah, once. I've probably seen pieces and parts of it, a number of times.
When you watched it, did you have a problem specifically with certain aspects where you just sat there and you're like, that is not accurate and that should not be in this film?
No, if anything, it was kind of the opposite. I was proud to have been represented, like the units be represented the way that they were. I was proud that the story of the battle in itself was told. And I feel like, it was kind of the predecessor to all these other, American Sniper and all these other very successful movies that have come out. So I get Hollywood is going to do its thing. And, they have certain dynamics that they have to work within. I totally get that. I'm a person that I don't watch a lot of military films. The ones that I do watch, I don't sit there and pick apart for accuracy. Oh, that would never happen. We would never, I'm not that guy. It's a movie. It's meant to be entertainment. I understand that even, a person could be depicted doing things that they didn't necessarily do. I totally get all that. It's interesting. So there's a component of that that's involved with this project too. And how did, the information collecting, how did it get turned into, if you think about specifically the story, and as Mark Bowden started to kind of pull pieces of it together, the majority of it is hearsay. It would not stand up in a court of law. I heard this guy said this, did this. I heard this guy, that type of thing. So there are a lot of components to the movie that are very accurate. There are a lot of components that aren't very accurate, and kind of how do they fill in the blanks? That's all very interesting to me.
Well, I look forward to seeing it when it comes out. And Brad had said something about how there'll be photos and stuff. There will also be photos later in this interview. So if you're watching the video version, we're going to have a fun thing we've been doing. Brad has some cool ones, so make sure to stick around for that. Was there a moment that you always look back to from Black Hawk Down and you said to yourself in that moment, I am not making it out? Like, I will not survive today because of this one thing.
It was kind of the entire day, the entire night. There was a portion of time, I think, in the middle of the night where things kind of calmed down and it wasn't as chaotic, and we were just kind of sitting waiting for guys in helicopters to get, extricated and things like that. And it wasn't until the sun started to kind of peak back up where you're like, oh, this is going to turn back on again. But for the initial assault and, 2 or 3 times that I went out into the city, it was just, I don't think any of us are going to make it out alive. And so every time we would kind of get back and be secure and, all right, get more ammo, and we're going back out to try and find this other crash site. And I didn't think that it was happening for any of us. I kind of came to peace. I was just telling my son about this actually the other day, but I kind of came to peace with, okay, if I get hit in the chest, like I've got a plate carrier, hopefully that stops it. If I get hit in the arms or the legs, chances are I'll live. And if I get hit anywhere else, it's probably going to be pretty quick and traumatic and over. So I hope that I remember thinking specifically in the middle of the afternoon, I hope that I can just like look at the blue sky and have something peaceful to look at, not this shithole, what I'm looking at in front of me. I hope that's not my last moments. And that kind of gave me a little bit of peace.
So Outkick, we got a younger audience. A lot of people watching this weren't even alive in 93. I was barely alive in 93. Can you kind of explain from your estimate, what are the numbers situation here? Roughly, how many Americans are out fighting, and what size, if you had to estimate, force are you guys facing?
So I think, if you think about it in terms of, we're in a very large urban metropolitan type of area, a significant number of people, crowds and crowds, swarms of people on some of the operations that we did prior to October 3rd and 4th. We were having to use the helicopters to come in and kind of dust off the crowds to get people away from us, because there were that many. It's like being downtown in a major city. And, not necessarily the infrastructure and buildings and things like that weren't necessarily the same, but it was very much a downtown type of thing. I know that we killed about 2,000 Somalis, militiamen and fighters, and there were about 120 of us. So, if you look at those numbers, the majority of the casualties that we sustained on our end were out driving around looking for the crash site, people going to try and find the crash site. How do we do that? You asked the question about hindsight and looking back, and I realize now how, it was a different military. There was no Instagram with like seeing dudes with fortitude nods and tricked out guns and all that stuff. Like, there was nothing like that. We didn't have radios and just the means to communicate internally, so it was a totally different army. But when I look at how underprepared we were in that, what was our contingency if the exact thing that happened? Do we drive around looking for the crash site? Do we want to bring in, something else? Like, what's the contingency for that stuff? And if anything, I look back and I go, man, we were underprepared. I didn't know, as an example, is it okay when women or unarmed people come out into the street to point out locations? Like, is it okay to shoot them? Is it not okay to shoot them? So even that, you're putting questions into people's minds so that they can't just respond when they're in a situation. You have all these other things that are going on in your brain, trying to figure out if you're doing the right thing or not doing the right thing. There's no way to tell people, hey, this is what we're doing. You kind of see things and the volume of fire. We didn't have hearing protection, like everybody has nowadays. So it's just a completely different battle. But if anything, I look back and I go, we were way underprepared.
I know that you recently posted, I think on the anniversary, you were wearing a wristband. You said, I think the Instagram caption on your Instagram story was representing my buddy Pilla. That could be just off, but it was something along those lines. And I know the last time we spoke, you talked about how watching your friends get killed. Oh, there it is. There it is. Right there. You talked about how watching your friends getting killed changed your mentality, and you just got so unbelievably angry. I recently reshared that social clip, and I'm wondering if you could walk us through, if you could walk the Outkick audience through, on that day, once people started getting killed in action, how quickly did that change the calculus, the mindset, and the dynamics for you with what you were doing?
It was, at first, it was very chaotic and just not understanding what was happening. We didn't even make it to the target building. So we were already being significantly engaged, probably miles away from where we were supposed to ultimately end up. I didn't even understand that. We rolled out the gate and it was kind of like, we're going here, these guys are going here, literally. Okay, cool. Well, the target building should be behind us. And the first time I dismounted, I'm looking around and I guess this is the target building. And, I'm focused out this way to look for bad guys, and, was already engaging people and things along those lines. So I didn't really understand that we were being shot at when it first started happening. We weren't hearing the report of the weapon. We were hearing the crack of the bullet. And when you're like, we didn't have training environments back then that put us in situations where you could hear that. You didn't go downrange if other dudes were shooting. Everybody waited, stood on line, marched down to their target, things like that. So I didn't even understand that the crack of the bullet as it's going hypersonic or subsonic past, like I don't realize what's happening. And then as soon as I started to piece together, like, oh, we're getting people hurt here and somebody was killed, then it was kind of like, all right, you're gonna pay. And it turned into a very, not that it wasn't already violent situation, but it definitely upped the escalation of violence and, probably what was required just so that we all didn't die.
That every time I watch that clip, or like you just said it, it's stunning to me, especially given the fact that, again, you were way younger than I am currently in such a situation. Here's kind of an interesting one, and it's, if you could, we've seen a lot of World War II veterans go back to Germany. We've seen Vietnam veterans go back to Vietnam. If you could go back to Somalia, it's a little different because Somalia is still insanely dangerous. But would you go back to Somalia and visit the area that happened in, or is that something you have no interest in?
Um, I don't think that it's a question of no interest. It's more like, what's it going to do for me? And it's not going to bring me peace. It's not like I go, oh, if anything, maybe I would even be more disappointed that the place is still a gigantic shithole and isn't any better than what it was in 1993. So, I felt like at the time that not a single one of my buddies was worth what we were doing there. I'm glad that I went. I'm glad that I had that as a part of, my military career. It's a part of who I am today. It's not who I am today,
Right.
but I'm glad that I experienced it. I think everybody that went there would say that they were glad that they got to experience that, especially when the military was in a time of no war. So it was the only thing going for, another 7-8 years. No other conflict, maybe a little bit of stuff in Bosnia, but that's really about it. So I don't know. I don't think that going back there is going to do anything for me. It's not going to reconcile. Like, I don't go to bed at night, hating the Somali people,
Right.
or anything like that. There were AQ Al Qaeda militia guys that were there, and that was the majority of who we were battling. And then you have a population that's already, whipped into a frenzy and upset about their life situation and everything else that kind of started to follow suit. And everybody and their brother that had an AK is sticking it out the window, shooting at you as you go by, and that type of thing. So I don't have any animosity towards anybody. It's not going to heal me or fix something inside me. I think I'm pretty good. And, I don't really see the point.
That was an excellent answer. I like that, and I like the fact that you pointed out that you feel you're good. There's no animosity. That's neat to hear. I do want to pivot a little bit. One thing we didn't really talk about at all last time we spoke is your experience once you get to a tier one operator in Iraq. And I just have a couple brief questions on Iraq, because I feel like a lot of young people, that was like a different lifetime for them. They read about it in history books. If you're in high school right now, there's a real chance you weren't even alive for most of the Iraq War, right?
Yeah.
When did you? So first off, can you briefly explain to the audience the unit that you are now in at this point? I believe you joined it in the late 90s, but I don't want to describe it. You can do a much better job than me.
Sure. So I went to a selection for Special Forces Operational Detachment Delta, and was selected and served there for 12 years, and got to go places. And I don't really talk about specific places that I went as a part of that unit or specific operations, but we can talk in general terms about, hey, what was life like, and
Yeah,
things along those lines. That's kind of the way I approach it. And not that I'm giving up any trade secrets or anything like that. I just like to be general about it, so that, I'm being respectful of a place that, generally is quiet about what it does.
absolutely. No, I totally respect it. I interviewed Jesse Betcher a few weeks back, and he's very much the similar. So I totally get it. We're going to keep it very broad, very general. What I'm curious most about is, what were challenges that you hadn't experienced before that the Iraq War presented, that Afghanistan or Somalia, it was just unique to what was going on in Iraq?
I don't know. I think my experience in Mogadishu was, very unique. And in that we were in a situation where we didn't have the means to really save ourselves. And even as bad as things got in other situations in places that I went, like I never felt like that. You know, we had things that could help out on the battlefield. We, you know, there's stuff like that that we didn't have in Mogadishu. And, you know, if anything, it was like, man, this is like cheating, you know, like we definitely have the upper hand. I got to see up close and personal kind of like what a jihadi looks like, and you know how different that is from someone who's like, we'll say, a regime loyalist, you know, someone who's just been in the past loyal to a specific political regime, whatever that might be. And you know, there was definitely, you know, something about that these guys weren't afraid to die. They would march right into fire, you know, do whatever they could, bait you into things, bait you into situations, whether they died or not, they didn't care. And that was probably the biggest thing that stood out to me as being completely different from, say, Mogadishu, where people weren't highly skilled. They, you know, if they had the ability to set up any sort of IEDs in Mogadishu, it would have completely changed that battle even significantly more for the worse. So, and I don't feel like we walked out of Mogadishu like we lost or anything like that. But yeah, they definitely didn't have their shit together the same way, you know, that the Iraqis did later on.
That's fascinating, and I don't think I've ever heard anyone say it like that in an interview. Because, and again, correct me if I'm wrong, the Iraqi military, Saddam's military, fell in like 3 weeks, right?
Sure.
It was over very quickly. At what point did the Americans, whether it's the high level commanders or whoever it might be, at what point did people start realizing like seems to be a lot of foreign fighters that are showing up in the woodwork here?
It took a year or more before that really started to show up. You'd see little pockets of stuff here and there, but it wasn't like, okay, every target that we're going out to do, we're, you know, running into these types of folks. So it was, you know, a gradual thing. You could see it happen.
And I assume that, well, let me ask you this. When you're in an urban environment, much like Mogadishu, or you're maybe in Iraq, or maybe less to an extent Afghanistan, how do you know that's a good guy, that's a bad guy, that's an innocent civilian just going about their day, that's a terrorist? Because they're all dressed relatively the same, right? And they're not trying to draw attention to themselves if they don't have to. So how difficult is it to know that's just a person trying to survive, and that person's out here looking to cause major trouble?
Yeah, there is an intangible, and if it anything, you know, I'll equate it to like sixth sense. And there were times with, you know, teammates even where you enter a facility, you enter a structure, you enter somebody's home, and you can almost catch like, man, these are bad dudes. Or, and 9 times out of 10, it was, these are good people. Like they're not, you know, trying to do anything, or they got some idiot cousin that's into something bad and we're here looking for that person. You know, but it definitely was something that there's an intangible something that you're picking up on. And if you, I don't subscribe to this, so it wasn't something that I was trained in, you know, but you hear about like concentric rings, right? It's like, if you do these types of things, then this is probably the kind of area that you live in. And if you live in this certain area, then you probably have this kind of car. And if you have, so there are these like indicators that you pick up on almost subconsciously as you're, you know, getting closer to wherever it is you're going to end up. And you start nonverbal cues, body language, dress, you know, all the people that you're encountering. Do they have pets? Like there's all these different things that you're picking up on that aren't necessarily anything that we're, you know, taught or able to be taught in books. And if anything, it really was about experience and, you know, kind of getting into a situation where, you know, hey, just kind of read that stuff. I don't know of any other way to describe it.
I interviewed a guy a while ago who was shot in Iraq by a terrorist disguised as a woman. You know, they were in like a full whatever the name I forget is thing. They flipped up an AK and shot him. Did you, in your experience, ever come across like I don't know if I would say devious tactics, but was that the norm where they would just kind of exploit like I'm trying to think how to phrase this. Like we want to be respectful of the local population, right? The cultural norms of the women are going to maybe dress a certain way. Was
Sure.
that normal that terrorists would then exploit kind of that kindness or understanding to then try to kill Americans?
I mean, I have to give them credit, right? Like that's your ability to adapt and change based on, what you're experiencing is the only thing that you've got to be successful. So if you're going to continue to do things the same way against the same type of people, they're going to learn how you do things. They're going to pass, experience on from one group to the next. And, so I don't know. I look at it and I go, we have to be a step ahead of that. So if you're experiencing that, then what can we do to counter what they're trying to do?
That's
Right.
a good way of looking at it. What's it like when I assume a lot of type A personalities, a lot of headstrong individuals, right? Because you got to be, kind of a beast to be successful at this level. Conflict, disagreement. What happens when a bunch of type A personalities get in a room and all of a sudden they cannot agree on how things should be handled, how they're going to be handled? What's the conflict resolution at that kind of level look like?
We did a really good job in the training course of there was this every Friday kind of gripe session where we're done training for the week. And if there are things we need to bring up and talk about, let's go air that and talk about it. It's definitely an ambiguous environment, right? People aren't wearing rank. It's not like I have to stand there at parade arrest talking to my team leader or my troop leadership or whoever it might be. It's all very kind of benign and ambiguous. And, that has its own challenges. And, I felt like in the Rangers, while I was there, it wasn't ambiguous. It was, I'm a sergeant, you're a private, and this is the way you address me. And I tell you what to do, and you just do it. You don't question me. There's no anything like that. I think you have to be just as good of a follower as you do, being a leader. So if I'm the kind of guy that's going to snipe every time my leader says, hey, we need to go do this, and I'm either going to complain about it or I'm going to pick his plan apart or whatever that might be, like I'm not being a good follower at that point. Hey, maybe I don't 100% agree with this, but maybe there's another way that we can kind of accomplish the same thing. And I don't need to get into an argument about it with this guy. We're friends,
Right.
our spouses are friends, our kids play together. We have barbecues at each other's houses, that type of thing. And then all of a sudden, hey, we need to go do this. Like, got it. Let's do it.
So you got to be kind of selfless. You got to be good, selfless, not selfish,
Yeah, you
selfless.
got to be really selfish.
Yeah, sorry, no, that slipped out wrong. So essentially, you're saying you got to be a good team player. You got to be a guy in the huddle willing to adapt to whatever it might be, even if you don't 100% agree with it. Is that correct?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that's probably a good life lesson outside the military, just in life in general as well. On the flip side of that, what are the complications and struggles to deploy that often in such a high intensity role and then have a family back home? How do you balance those things? What do you got to do to make sure that everyone is getting the attention they need and your life is, you know, flowing the correct way? What challenges does that present to a guy like you?
I think that everywhere in the military is better about this today than they were when the GWAT started to kind of crank up. And I think that they're, whether it's services provided or, just kind of leaders being more switched on to you're more than just a commando. You're more than just a soldier. You're a father, a husband, a parent, whatever it might be. And, I think that they're turning out much more well-rounded, soldiers nowadays. So I feel like, at the beginning, it was kind of all about, we don't know how long this thing is going to last. So we're going to be commandos and take every opportunity we can to put ourselves in a situation so we get that next deployment, so that we're there, so we don't miss anything. And this is going to go away in a year or whatever, whatever it might be. And, if anything, I think 21 years of war fighting kind of taught the military in general, there is more to it than just deploying and doing the war fighting aspect. How do we better sustain and equip and all of that? So I don't know if that answered the question.
Speaking of family, I know that your son just recently graduated boot camp in the Army, and I'm curious, did anyone know that he was a legacy? Anyone know the background?
Yeah, so really kind of funny situation when he came home from college. He had done 2 years in college and was football scholarship, and really liked the team camaraderie aspect of football. And when you're in high school, that's about all you can do, other than maybe other sports or other activities that kind of give you that sense of group and sense of team and all of that. And he came on and was like, look, I can't write or talk about any of the stuff that I want to. I'm being pushed to write about things from a perspective and a belief system that I don't necessarily subscribe to, et cetera, et cetera. So he comes home in May and says, hey, I want to join the Army. And I said, well, don't join the Army because you don't like college. There are a lot of other things you can do. And this is kind of out of the blue. So anyway, we go through the whole conversation and we talk for a while. And I told him, if this is what you're looking to do, I'm putting no pressure on you to follow in my footsteps. It's a long journey. And, maybe it's something that you don't have the will to do. And I don't want to put the pressure on you to try and do something. So he goes to the recruiter, says, I want to be a Ranger. The recruiter says, we don't have any Ranger contracts. They give out less than 100 a year. So it's kind of slim pickings. So I contact some friends of mine in the Rangers who have their liaison show up at the basic training companies, and they kind of try and get guys that are unassigned, that don't necessarily have jobs. They're coming in as unassigned infantry, and hey, we want them to come to the Rangers. So they send these guys out there. Well, they made a special trip for my son, and his company was out at the range, and they're going about qualifying and doing all the stuff that they're supposed to be doing. And this guy calls him out by name in front of the whole company. And he comes over and has him sign some paperwork on the hood of the car. And he walks back over like no big deal. And the drill sergeants are immediately on him. Who the fuck is your dad? Who is your father? Is he a politician? Is he? So the goods got given up, and they started getting on him pretty hard. So they started, hey, where's Mini Delta? Where's Little Delta? Where's started calling him all these names, and of course they're giving him extra attention now and making him do a little bit more than what they were kind of asking of other people because of his legacy and everything else. So I'm just super proud of him, and I told him, don't say a word, man. When you go there, don't talk about me. Don't talk about what I did. Just survive on your own and be your own person and everything else. And then you find out the drill sergeants are like, hey, so was your dad like really strict when he brought you up? They ask him all these questions. They're like, I'm like, no. Anyway, yeah, it was just kind of an interesting aspect where he was keeping it under wraps, and it kind of got brought to everyone's attention, not by his own doing.
That's an epic story. That's actually hilarious. Did he tell you? Did he enjoy boot camp? Like, is he having a good time? He likes the decision he made.
Yeah, he had I think too much time off. So like when I graduated basic training, we had maybe 18 hours. We graduated, we'll say noon on a Friday, and we had to be back by like 4 o'clock the next day. Something like that. So maybe it was a 24-hour type of pass, but we got to stay out overnight, go out and get a good dinner, wake up, have a good breakfast and everything, and then kind of go back. And they had a few days where it just kind of, it takes you out of your mind frame. You're in this world and you're completely isolated from everything. It's not like they can sit around on their phones and know what's going on. And anyway, so we were talking about this yesterday as kind of he was heading back for the final time, and it's like, man, I miss you now. I was in a good place. I kind of was in my routine and doing okay. And now, I'm watching football and I'm, having great food and all that stuff. So,
Well, we wish him the best of luck in the next step he takes. I think it's awesome, and I saw that you posted about it on Instagram. You initially talked about it on a live stream a while back when he was thinking about joining. So that's really neat. An American Joyride. We wish your son all the best. Now we're going to talk about your music career, but before we do that, we're going to do some photos, which we've been doing with all these interviews. For those of you watching on YouTube, you're going to be able to see these up on your screen. Brad is going to give us a quick little breakdown summary of the background story, and then we're going to jump into his music with Silence and Light. If you're listening on Spotify, head on over to YouTube for this segment because you're not going to want to miss these. First one up, it is you in a firehouse, Fire Department, New York, Engine 24, Ladder 5, Battalion 2, and you are holding what could best be described as kind of like a shadow box setup, American flag. I think that's a challenge coin in the middle, and then it's got the Fire Department patch. And it says, in 2005, I returned this FDNY patch to its rightful home, Ladder 5 in Greenwich Village. It was cut off of a dress uniform of a man who'd served in the Air Force, and then as sergeant to the NYPD, and lastly as probationary fireman to FDNY. There they were sent, and this is interesting, by someone anonymous to Fort Bragg, along with a dozen or so other patches. To this day, nobody is clear on who sent it or how they arrived. You say returning the patch didn't seem appropriate all by itself. So you wore the Fire Department patch in combat, correct?
yes.
And then you brought it back with a unit coin and you did this nice little thing for him. So what is the background of this photo and then how this kind of all came together?
Well, you did a great job explaining what it all was and kind of how it came to be. But there were this box of patches that showed up, and I was coming back from running our selection course right after September 11th. And I showed up and I saw this box and looked in the box, and there are all these FDNY patches. And so you could see they still had like the blue threads from where they had cut them off of people's uniforms. And some of them had phrases, die mother, rot in hell, hope you burn in hell. Some of them had names, and I kind of got the gist of it was they want us to carry these forward. And, whether it's like, I don't think we would throw stuff out like death cards, but I think that was kind of in their idea of, so somebody somewhere knew somebody where I was, and they made this thing happen, but just kind of anonymously. I've never been able to get to the bottom of, who sent it and all of that. So I had this patch with me, always like breast pocket, carried it around, had it on my, where all my personal items and stuff like that was always sitting there. And, it got to go be a part of a lot of historic stuff. And when there were some unique circumstances that happened where my patch had a name on the back. And in 2005, September 11th, they had family members of those that were killed, reading the names of those who had passed away. And I'm on my treadmill at home and running, and I see this beautiful blonde woman, and she says the name that was on the patch that I had. And I was like, wow, that is crazy. And that was what started kind of the quest of like, well, who was this guy? I didn't know that he was necessarily a person that was killed. Maybe it was just a fireman that wanted his name, to be carried forward, whatever it might be. So anyway, I did some research, found out where he was stationed, read about him. And as I was reading about him, it was almost as if I was reading about myself. And, dude loved to wear flannel, and he was always the life of the party. And like to have a good time, loved animals, blah, blah, blah. So I felt like, man, I need to do something with this. I can't go be public, like let's have a news crew there and hey, here I am. I'm an active member of an organization and, don't want to talk about that. So I asked a buddy of mine who was in New York, hey, the next time I'm up, whenever that is, can we go by this place? And, I just want to drop this off super low key, be in and out. And, they can do with it whatever they want. They can give it to his family. They can, any of that stuff. So it kind of things transpired from there. But anyway, that's kind of how it went. So I thought, okay, I don't want to just take this back and be like, hey, I'm returning this patch. I've got to do something with it. And just putting it in a frame by itself didn't seem appropriate. So I took one of the assault flags off of my assault vest and put it in there. And then I thought, okay, I went and took it to somebody who could do that. And they were like, what about a coin? What if we put a challenge coin? And I was like, yeah, I'll get a unit coin and put that in there too. And that's what I did. So it's just this beautiful, very powerful, both sides represented. My real intent in returning the patch to the firehouse was to let the firemen know, like, my brothers are over there right now shellacking dudes because of what happened September 11th. So this was at a time when politically, it was, why are we there? Oh, this is like an oil thing. Someone's politically got an agenda that, well, wait, we all voted for going to war over there. And now all of a sudden we're questioning it when it starts to have a human toll. And so the news was every day, 3 more guys were killed today and questioning why we were there and all of that. And I wanted the firemen to know that we got your back because of what happened. We haven't forgotten. Doesn't matter if everybody else in America forgot, we didn't forget, and we got you.
Wow. I'm speechless. I could clip that and spread it, and that doesn't make you proud to be an American. I don't know what will. Did they say anything specifically to you when you presented it to them?
Well, that kind of turned into a whole other thing. Like the guy that took me over there the night before, he starts telling me like, hey, we're gonna go there tomorrow. Like, okay, cool. We're gonna go at 10 a.m. because all the guys coming in on the morning shift will be there and everybody leaving from the night shift will be there. So it'll be a full house. And I'm like, dude, I don't want to do this.
Yeah.
Like, I don't want to be up there, speaking in front of a group of people. Like I have nothing prepared. This isn't what I wanted to do. And anyway, it kind of transpired to like, well, the family's going to be there too. And like, dude, you were putting so much pressure on me. Like, I don't want to do this. So anyway, that was kind of how it rolled out. So at some point, I was being as benign as I could possibly be, hey, here's this thing, there was a whole lot of explaining about like, is this guy in the army? What is this guy? Like nobody really understood. I can say that, after what I told them that, I don't think there were too many dry eyes in the firehouse. So it was a powerful life moment.
Wow.
It was.
Yeah, and for those of you who can see the photo, you can flip through it on your screen. It's an awesome photo. When I sent it over to Brad in the email, I put in parentheses, I think this whole story is incredible, and the story you just told even beat the one you shared on Instagram. So that's really cool and a classy gesture without a doubt. Next one, you're rocking a thick goatee. I think you're wearing Oakley's. You're throwing up a peace sign, and you're in some kind of vehicle, and it says AR-670-1 standard question mark. Hump day at band camp, and the geotag location is your mom's house. Do you know what this photo's from?
I know where I was. I don't want to disclose where I was, but
Okay.
it's one of those things where, you're kind of out there and you're doing your own thing. And I think that's the Serb victory symbol. I was always fond of that from the Bosnia Croat Serbian war that happened in the mid 90s. So anyway, it was just kind of, I had been called out on social media about I'm a poser and this is, stolen valor because your flag is out of regulation and some other things like that. So I think this was kind of in response to some of that stuff where, I lived AR 670-1, which is like the Army regulation for proper military courtesies and customs and uniform wear and all of that stuff. And you don't necessarily have to be that to be a good soldier. And, it's meant to kind of show, I guess, ambiguity and all of that is something that you can use to your advantage, I guess.
Very neat. I love the geotag locations. Pretty funny. And I saw the Instagram post where that guy messaged you when I was scrolling your Instagram. It was like he said, "What was your unit? What was your MOS? Your flag's wrong."
Yeah, what's your MOS? And I like responded to him like, I was in 12th group,
Yeah.
some bogus crap. But he messaged me, so I didn't see that message for almost 18 months. It sat in some, I don't know Facebook. I'm on Facebook. I didn't know how Facebook worked. I started a Facebook page because it was the only way you could pay for advertising on Instagram. And so I was doing like band advertisements and, at least promoting stuff monetarily that way. And so I had to stand up a Facebook page to do it. So anyway, there were all this message stuff. Like, I don't look at the Facebook thing. I hate Facebook, not a fan of it, whatever. And I figured out that they're like, oh, there are all these message requests that I can't see in the messages from actual friends. And that's where this guy had called me out. So I screenshot that and then I posted it. Well, he messaged me after I post the thing, saying, hey, this guy, says, hey, I'm stolen valor and all that. He sends me another message that I don't see that says, turn your people off. I got the point. This is harassment. If you don't tell your people that, like, I didn't tell anybody to do anything. And I blurred his account. So like they couldn't even, but people were hard at work, finding who this guy was and found him and started harassing him. So
Well,
anyway.
everyone's a tough guy on the internet until, people, decide to respond, and then all of a sudden it's not funny anymore to them. They don't want to
Yeah,
talk at the same level all of a sudden.
yeah.
All right, this one I picked it because the caption's just frankly funny, and it's also geotagged your mom's house. It says balls deep, as we used to say, long before it was a popular term. The meaning to us referred to how far into bad guy territory we were. These are a few pics from that day, and also a pic of us getting ready to go. We lost a mate on this day, Andy Fernandez. Although he was brand new to the unit, he had just been assigned. He left his mark and will forever be etched into historic endeavors. R.I.P. Andy. So I know you probably can't get into specifics. The caption's hilarious, the top half of it, anyways. But
Yeah.
are you able to say anything about what this Instagram post is in relation to?
That was post-gunfight. I think it's been talked about in some book, someplace. So I don't read any military history stuff, so I don't know. People will send me things sometimes where like, oh, this must be from this book that so and so wrote about. Like, I don't know. It was kind of post-gunfight. We were outnumbered and surrounded by 130, 150 dudes, and had at least beat everybody back enough that that was kind of that moment when that picture was taken. So we didn't necessarily know at the time, like, it was any gunfight is a scary moment, and you don't really necessarily know the outcome, but it was almost for me and where I was, it was almost a fun gunfight. Like, they couldn't hit me where I was, and they couldn't hit my group where we were based on the terrain. And so we were almost kind of laughing, running back and forth, shooting at these guys over here, go grab some more ammo, go shoot at these guys over here. And so it wasn't, a terrifying moment. It turned into not to be a terrifying moment. But then we started hearing radio calls, hey, we got some people hit and injured, and okay, well, now this is a serious thing. It's not a funny thing anymore. And if anything, the post kind of reflects that, where,
Right.
initially, hey, haha, fun. This was, a good day. And then, somebody paid the ultimate price that day. And yeah, but that's about as much as I can say.
And for those of you listening to this, that day has been discussed on other interviews I've done as well. So if you're interested, you can check that out. Jesse Betcher briefly spoke about it as well. So thanks for giving the background on that. We got 2 photos left. This one, I think you guys are outside of maybe a mini bird. I can't tell. Yeah, it's a mini bird for sure. It says it's you, Chili Palmer, Chris. The guy on the right has his face blacked out, and the pilots are ready to go. And it says, one time at band camp, about to deliver some hate. Thanks, Chris Van Zant, for the pick. Never seen this before right now. And then hashtag effing wear a shirt. What's going on? I censored that, but what's going on with this?
Yeah, I think it was summertime and, very warm out. So we were rolling around in, very non-standardy t-shirt. I think I'm wearing a t-shirt in that picture. Or a couple of us are wearing t-shirts in that picture. And it's, I guess, not the intent of the post, but like you do what's required, and if it means not wearing a military blouse, conducting a military operation, like we were flexible enough to be able to kind of tailor what we did, where we did it. And I don't know, but that was a moment where it's like, it's cool to see something, another example of an artifact that somebody else has, that it's like, I've never seen this before. So, super cool to that many years later, like, wow, okay, we're all like, we're having a good time in that photo,
It's a really cool photo, and this is the last photo, and it's actually going to be a perfect segue to Silence and Light. It's a photo of Ozzy Osbourne. He's got a Black Sabbath War Pigs patch. He's pointing to it, and he says, I took this pic of Ozzy Osbourne backstage before the Black Sabbath show at Jones Beach Amphitheater. The patch had been worn on Target, which is really interesting, along with several others that were given to the whole band. You tag a guy, Geezer Butler actually spotted this for the show, which was amazing to see. Ozzy is a gracious human being, as is Sharon Osbourne, great people, and love spending time with them. So what's up with the whole Ozzy Osbourne Black Sabbath patch?
Let's see. So I can't really talk about who wore that where.
Okay.
But it was given to me. There were 4 or 5 of them that were given to me. And I'm friends with Jack Osbourne, who kind of made the connection happen. So he was like, oh man, Dad and Mom know about you. I've talked about you, had invited me to dinner at their place a number of times when I was out in California. And I could never, as bad as it sounds, I had other stuff that I was doing and literally couldn't go over to Ozzy and Sharon's. And, he was a music hero to me. Black Sabbath was probably one of my favorite bands growing up. So, to have to literally turn down like, hey, Sharon, I can't come over for steak with you and Ozzy because I got other stuff I got to do. But, anyway, that's what happened. So I had, for probably 2013 to whenever that picture was taken, I want to say it was 2017, maybe. Jack just kept trying to make the link up happen, hey, they're going to be here. Are you going to be anywhere near? And it just couldn't happen. So anyway, brought these patches and some friends with me, and got to hang with Oz and Sharon for probably a good hour. And incredibly gracious people. They didn't have to take the time. They're about to play a show and everything else, and but really were thoughtful, considerate, really nice people that took the time to kind of listen to what I had to say. And being able to tell Ozzy, like, dude, your music is like coursing through my veins when I'm over here doing these things. And you don't know how awesome that is. Like, oh, we're not worthy. Literally that moment. And I'm not a starstruck person. I've got a lot of friends that are pretty well known. And I don't know, but being around him was completely different. It was like, all right, well, I got to take a picture. So anyway, I handed him the patches, and he was gracious enough to give them to everybody else in the band. And their bass player, Geezer Butler, had his sewn onto his shirt for the night. So he wore it up on stage for the whole show. And we're like, dude, 15-year-old Brad would like literally shit his pants if he knew that like you gave something to Ozzy, who gave it to Geezer Butler, who wore it during the show. It just couldn't. It's a very surreal moment. That picture though of Ozzy. So I said, "Hey Oz, do me a huge favor, man." We took some pictures together and stuff like that. But can you hold this patch so that I can take a picture of it and send it to the person that it came from? And he's like, absolutely. So he's holding it, whatever he's doing. And I've also got there the first, like, I just was boom, 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 taking, as many pictures as I could. And originally it was upside down. And so I'm like taking pictures, turning it in his hand like this. And he's just holding it the whole time, doing the Ozzy face. And it's like, okay, there we go. And anyway, it was just one of those moments where you're like, dude, this is an amazing night. And yeah, powerful moment for me, and kind of full circle on the whole music, combat, everything thing.
And that is, like I said, that's going to be a perfect segue to Silence and Light, which is a rock band made up solely of former veterans. And you are a founding member. It was you and one other person, correct? Jason Everman are
Yes.
the two guys that founded it. Let me throw you out the first question. Let's assume I'm an alien. I just dropped to Earth. I don't know anything about rock music. I don't know anything about music in general. And I meet you. What are you going to tell me, who's completely ignorant of everything music related? What is Silence and Light?
Man, talk about putting the pressure on me here. In a nutshell, it's a band. The intent was never for us to be all veterans, but it was, Jason and I starting to write and collaborate and put together music. Jason was in both Nirvana and Soundgarden prior to joining the Army in 1994. He joined the Army because of the things that he saw that happened in Mogadishu, interestingly enough. So he's in Nirvana and Soundgarden. We put out music, we take our music royalties, and we give those to charitable organizations that help the units from where we came from, where we served. So that's our mission. That's what we're trying to do. And if you buy an album, we're taking 100% of the royalty that we get from that. There's some attrition that happens along the way from different people that take their portion, but we contribute 100% of that to charitable organizations that help guys and gals that are serving in those units.
Yeah, that's a great way to have a band, not just have a band, but help other people through your music, both from a money standpoint and because your music can help people. Like you listen to Ozzy Osbourne when you were getting it on, obviously. Now you have Silence and Light. Now you have one album out, there's a second on the way. What were some changes you really wanted, or what are things you want to do differently from album one that were a priority to switch it up for album two?
I think, anything artistic, creative, it could be a military operation, but rarely do things go the way you want them to go exactly. And like anything, it's the ability to kind of, adapt to things that happen. The first album, I try and explain this to people, but we got offered by literally one of the biggest producers in the music business. He's a veteran also, a guy named Josh Goodwin, Gudwin. He's Bieber's producer, Celine, like literally people that I don't know because I don't follow that genre of music, but Bad Bunny, Dua Lipa, like these people, you check them out.
Stars,
like,
yeah, major stars.
Who's this person? And it's like 220 million follower type of people. So anyway, he's their producer. He reached out and said, hey, I want to help. I want to produce the album. And was like, well, let me see who this guy is. And that's how I kind of found out. I totally lied to the guy and said, we're ready to go because of his schedule. He only had certain dates free. And I was like, oh yeah, we'll be ready by January. When I rogered up to recording this thing in January was maybe end of September. We didn't even have a singer. So we like literally limped this thing across the finish line. And I'm proud of it. I'm proud that we got it done more than anything. Like everybody talks about, I could write a book or I could do this or I could do that. Another thing to actually do it. The second part of it was like standing up a business, and this thing makes money and we sell merchandise, and what do we do? Like how does that all happen? You're your own boss. So, album cover art, and where does that come from, and what do we want the font to be for this thing. Like, it turns into everything. So it's a huge undertaking. It's not just, hey, a couple of dudes getting together in somebody's basement playing, a few tunes and then recording it. There's a huge piece to it. Social media piece is another part of it. I mean, that could be a full-time job for just about anybody if they wanted it to be unpaid. But that's that's one of those things. So anyway, that's kind of what it is. The second album, we had the benefit of COVID. We had the benefit of being able to do a lot of writing. And so the music is way more mature, and all the pieces and parts that should be there are there. And all the things that we needed to capture in the studio got captured. We didn't have the time or luxury to get all that stuff done the first go around. So it was literally like we limped 12 songs across the finish line on album one. Of that, 4 of them we couldn't get all the way completed because of time constraints and other things. And this album, 13 tunes, they're all really solid. Like, any one of these songs is just standalone, amazing. And we're all our own, worst critic. And if I like something and the other dudes in the band, they're all music critics too. This is something that we all like, and we all kind of grew up with the same stuff, whether it was grunge or Sabbath or whatever. We all take a little bit of who we are and we put it into the music, and it's taken its own life. So I get a lot of compliments from people that are like, dude, nobody's doing stuff like this. And I'm like, well, there's some people probably doing stuff like that still, but there's definitely a throwback kind of vibe to it. And it is very grunge, 90s grunge, but it's a very modern sound. And most of what we talk about, like, I've always been very particular about, there's Van Halen rock and party, good time, we're riding around in limos, doing all this, whatever behavior. And then there are bands like Alice in Chains, which is like, these aren't happy songs. They're not downers necessarily, but it's deeper than just, the party rock song. And we would fall definitely more on the Alice in Chains, Nirvana, Stone Temple Pilots kind of vibe, probably more so because it just sounds deeper. It sounds more serious,
Well, let me ask you this. For you personally, not the band as a whole, but for you personally, Brad Thomas, what is the most satisfying thing when it comes to music? Like, if you do this on a day or at a concert, you can go to bed knowing, hey, that is what made me happy to be here. Is there one thing that really stands out, or is it a couple things?
Had a lot of people, connect and say, man, I listened to this tune. I was on the treadmill in the gym and I got tears rolling down my face. Like, that's huge. The fact that, why I'm out there and why I'm public doesn't have to do with me wanting to be a rock star. Like, we're never going to be lucrative enough to be riding around in limos, on our private jet with Bruce Dickinson from Iron Maiden piloting us from show to show, right? Like, that's not reality. But if I can be an example to other people to say, hey, I figured out a way after serving 20 years and doing some pretty intense stuff and living a lot of dark times and dark days, if I can find out a way that's healthy, positive, and creative to do something as an outlet for some of these feelings, and give me a sense of purpose and giving back to the community. If I can do this, here's my combat resume. If I can do it, anybody can do it. So it really was meant to be an example. I ended up being the guy that just started doing all the media. And initially, the concept was every band member would contribute his portion of the royalties to whatever organization he believed in. And as I started doing more and more media, then it just became more about this one specific organization or these 2 specific organizations. So anyway, that was kind of the initial concept. And, we might limit it to more organizations. We may grow it to more organizations. We'll see how this next album does. But the first one absolutely killed it. And this, we've got a publicist behind it. So they're going to get it out there all over the place.
And again, for you guys watching at home or listening on Spotify, where of course you can find his music, his band's music, it's Silence and Light. When is the next album dropping? Is there a concrete release date?
Man, good question. Next.
Oh, okay.
No. That was my attempt at some comedy in there.
Oh,
Like everything, right? It's like you have something happen and it kind of makes things adjust. We recorded this album with a guy who's incredibly talented, and we're getting some of the rough mix stuff back now. Not super happy with it, so we're going to kick it to the guy that did the mix on the first album. And if anything, I love the mix on the first album. The only thing I feel like it's lacking is more maturity. Like it just, the tunes don't have enough pieces and parts for what I intended them to be. Other people hear them and they're like, dude, this is awesome. Like, yeah, because they don't know the way it sounded in my brain when I wrote it. And that's always the thing with like art. It's, you're trying to get it out there as close to the thing that you have in your mind as possible. This definitely has all the components. It just doesn't sound exactly the way I want it to sound. And it's very hard to go back and forth with someone remotely, even if you're sitting there in the studio, and get things exactly right. So we just hit that delay. Should have it to my homie Johan to do all the mix. That'll probably take a month. And from there, the publicist needs about 8 weeks with the final music. So she can send it to all the different publications, print, and all of that stuff, so that they have time to do print and everything, so that times with the release. So initially we were like, we'll have it out in 2022, easy. Everything's recorded, everything's done. And, there's as much work on the back end of recording as there is in the studio itself. So we're just kind of finishing all that stuff up now.
and do you have any upcoming shows? I think you've teased the Rock the Green Beret in Nashville. That's November 13th, I believe.
Yeah.
You can so we've got that coming up for people who are interested. Do you have any other shows on the books if people wanted to catch Silence and Light in person?
No, we're gonna, like, that's a part of also like promoting an album, is getting out there and playing it and playing music and things like that. Our plan for 2022 was rehearse, make sure everything's as tight as it can possibly be, go into the studio, take our time, make sure we get the right mix, we get everything the way we want it to be, and then release it by the end of the year, so that in the spring, summer next year, we can get out there and kind of promote it. So if anything, there's just a delay, but I think next year is going to be super busy for us, and plan on being out there a lot more. We're not a band that's going to like get in a van and tour up and down the East Coast playing in front of 8 people. Our first show was kind of opening for Lenny Kravitz in DC. And we've had the chance to do a lot of other private shows for charitable organizations and things like that. Some of them are huge. We did one for Third Eye Blind in May. That was a great show. I feel like that's kind of our zone and our niche, is being able to play to some of these kind of like private organization, people contributing financially to help, put everything together. So we'll do that. And, the goal would be play some festivals and get onto some festival bills. And that's kind of, I think, where our sweet spot, that's where we want to be.
Well, I'm a huge, huge fan of not just you as a dude, but I love the fact that you're killing it in the music game and you're doing something unique with your band Silence Light. I got one last question on this, but before I ask that, Apple Music, Spotify, YouTube, Instagram, am I missing anywhere where you also can find Silence and Light?
Amazon, I mean, you can Google it and you'll find we're all over the place, but any music platform that you get your music now, we're on that. So if you buy something on iTunes, you are directly contributing more to these organizations that help folks. We're sending everything right now to Warrior's Heart, which is a physical facility in Texas that helps people that are suffering from PTSD, whether it's first responders or special operations people or just the soul, whomever it might be, guys and gals. And the thing that I love about that organization, it was started by a former Delta guy, also Tom Spooner, who's a buddy of mine. They do PTSD counseling, but they use art as a form of therapy. And whatever art is to you is what it can be. You could write poetry, you could paint, you could weld, you could sculpt, you could write music, you could, whatever it is. And that absolutely speaks volumes to me. So when I play the guitar, and I'm not a person that's sitting around thinking about 1993 and I wish I had done this differently. And I've got all this trauma. I'm not a person, like, my brain doesn't operate that way. But when I pick up a guitar, it's one of the things that I can do where my brain is just in flow state. Like, I'm not thinking about anything, good, bad, or indifferent. It's something. Cooking is another thing that I can do where, like, I'm grilling or making chili or do something else. It's just kind of a zone. And, so I love the fact that they're using art as a form of therapy in some way or another. And that's where we're contributing everything now. So you go out there, if you stream the music, we still get we still get royalties from that. It's not as much as if you buy something. So if you want to support these organizations or Warrior's Heart, more, buy it for $9.99 on iTunes. And that's going to send a lot more money there.
And you have some merchandise too.
Yeah,
right?
If people want to help the band, like, the album doesn't record itself and studio fees aren't free. And I think the first album probably ran to about 35 grand that, I basically paid for out of my own pocket. So mixing, mastering, all this stuff costs money. And traveling, staying in hotels, rehearsing, all of that stuff, it's not free. So if people want to help support the band, if they buy a t-shirt or merchandise, whatever we've got up on the website right now, I think we're revamping all of the merchandise stuff. The goal is by the time the album hits, we'll have all that stuff kind of refreshed so that it's all available there when the publicist and everybody else is really getting it out there. But if you want to do that and you buy a t-shirt, that's directly kind of helping us offset costs. We're at the point now where we're about breaking even. So, we're not in the hole and we're able to contribute and do all those things. And it's not necessarily us having to go out of our own pocket every time, something comes up. So
last one on this. Is Silence and Light the most capable action, or is it the most lethal band in the history of music?
Probably so. Yeah, I think, like, I would put our combat resume and time in service up against probably anybody else out there. So, and that was never the intent. It was just really kind of, hey, Jason, you were in the music business. I played music before I joined the Army, and, let's put something together and do something good with it. And it just kind of grew organically from producer to, other bandmates and everybody else has served. So we're at a point now where all 4 services are represented.
That is,
which was never, but literally Army, Navy, Air Force, and Marines are represented, and that wasn't the intent. Although there's 2 Army guys, so we still kind of
dominate the space, if you will. I got just a couple more questions. You got time for a couple more?
Yeah.
Okay. Now this is a fun one I've been asking more and more people. Whether in your military career or outside of it, have you ever seen or experienced something you truly could not explain? UFOs, paranormal, anything. Is there anything you went through or you witnessed where you're like, I have no answer for what this is?
Let me try and make this as short a story. I'm a long-winded person anyway, but I'll make this as short as I possibly can. I was in Ranger school, and I was telling someone, as we're laying there droning in the middle of the night behind a pine tree, pulling security on no bad guys. I'm explaining to one of my Ranger school mates about this reoccurring dream that I've had. And there was like some sort of virus that was spread. And one of the main, the main people in this dream was like trying to get to this certain place. And I think it was in New York, but, I don't really know. And it's like, he's coming across like cars out in the middle of, country roads, and like opens the car and there's people that are dead of the virus in the car and everything else. And so I go through this, 20-minute long story explaining all this like graphic detail that I've been dreaming about over and over and over again since as long as I can remember. Like, we'll say, 1972, 1973, I've got this thing rattling around in my brain. And he goes, oh yeah, that's the movie Omega Man with Charlton Heston in it, whomever. And I was like, are you kidding me? Like, this thing that I've literally thought I probably was a little kid and snuck down and was like watching TV from the stairs or something. And I've gone back and watched it, and I was like, that's my dream. That's my reoccurring dream from childhood. So, to answer your actual question, no, I've never really seen anything that I would say. There's been some weird stuff I've seen in the water. Was doing a bunch of like waterborne operation stuff in Panama, and saw stuff in the water that I was like, okay, that wasn't a crocodile. It wasn't a giant snake, but I mean, like a huge thing. Who knows what it was? But yeah, I've never, no UFOs.
Well, real quick, because you brought up the water thing. Have you ever? This is true. So people listen to this. I'm not making this up. You can read about it online. There was a British pilot, I believe, in the 50s or late 40s that photographed that snake that was apparently like 50 feet long from the air. And if you don't know, if you're listening to this, you don't know what I'm talking about. Just Google pilot snake, and they said when the thing stood up, it was like 10 feet in the air, and there's a photo of it, like in real life. So the fact that there's snakes that are that big roaming the wild is very terrifying, in my opinion.
I'm very fascinated by the unknown. Like I grew up as a kid, there was a amazing TV show called In Search of that was hosted by Leonard Nimoy, who is Spock in
Yeah.
the Star Trek. And it was always like looking into the paranormal, and here's the Loch Ness monster or Bigfoot or whatever it might be. And I love that show, exploration. And so I've had this conversation recently with people about certain things like, okay, Bigfoot, it was a huge phenomenon in like the 70s. There were movies about it, there were all kinds of things. I think Jack Osbourne's even doing a show like searching for Bigfoot or whatever. I refuse to believe that in 2022, when everybody in the world has a device that they can either take pictures with or video, that these things haven't shown up. So, I don't know what's going on with the whole UFO thing and the military kind of. I mean, if you think about the number of people that probably saw stealth bombers back in the 80s and 90s before, this thing was made public, or special things that fly around, drone stuff, like who knows what people have seen that they couldn't explain. And, not writing it all off as this doesn't exist, but
The big thing with Bigfoot, and I'm sure you'll agree, I'm on the same wavelength as you are. We have hunters all over America that go into the woods every year to hunt elk, deer, whatever it might be. And we have so many stories. They claim they saw a 10-foot tall creature walking towards them through the wood. But yet none of these guys armed with hunting rifles in the history of America have ever shot one of these things. Pretty suspicious how they all see them, but no one's ever, fired a round one time. I don't
yeah.
know. I think that
Or the Bigfoot believers are like, well, they're extinct now. They were, they were very thin, and we've never found bones. We've never found, where they lived, or, I find the ocean probably the most intriguing, and I'm an ocean person, like love surfing, just being in the ocean in general. There is so much we don't know about the ocean, and almost every time we go into the ocean, there's like some new species that's discovered. We're like, holy shit, there's this shark next to our submersible that we've never seen that's at 2,000 feet, depth or whatever it might be. And I find that super intriguing. The other one that I'll say, in addition to In Search of, was growing up as a little kid watching Johnny Quest. And, it's a show that came out in 1964, was 2 seasons, so 64 and 65. And it's a cartoon, but which is the only way you could really do it right, because some of the things they predicted so much. Like there's FaceTiming. They're literally got a little handheld device. They're FaceTiming with one another. But it was this very exploratory type of thing. I grew up with Adventure Team GI Joes. So at some point in the early 70s, the Vietnam War was so unpopular that they stopped making GI Joe as a soldier, and they made him Adventure Team, and he had a beard and the fuzzy hair and all of that stuff. And they had like these adventures that they would go on, deep sea exploring. You had a scuba diver, GI Joe. You had, these different things. And anyway, I feel like that probably was the impetus for military, doing something kind of that way. I wish that there was an organization like Adventure Team GI Joe that could go and be a part of that. That would have been cool.
What's the funniest thing you've ever seen while deployed? Any good prank stories? Any good comedy things?
I think that if Hollywood gets anything wrong about war, it's the lack of, funny stuff that happens like in the thick of horrible situations. That's one of the things that they get wrong is I feel like, for me, Chris, Chili, like all of us that were rolling around on the same team for the better part of like 5 years together, it was just nothing but grab assery and joking around and, pulling out the little Chili's a short guy. So we pull out the chili ladder and put it up against the little bird or against the vehicle. And like, we would take it places and stuff like that. It's just absolutely hilarious. Yeah, there was I think at some point it got written into Black Hawk Down. I can't remember, but there was like a donkey that was running around in the middle of the gunfight and like had a cart strapped to it. And it was like, you're like literally trading gunfire back and forth across the street. And it's like violence and chaos and all kinds of stuff. And like donkey just goes like running down the street by itself. And then it comes back and goes the other way. And you're like, dumb donkey, get out of here. At some point the donkey got hit. But anyways, it's the other thing that Hollywood never gets right is like the surreal aspect of things, where I don't think that it's anything that you're seeing isn't realistic. It's more like your brain can't comprehend what it's perceiving. So you're in this situation, there's like this intense overload of adrenaline and fear and all of that stuff. You're seeing stuff happen that you never, you can't really understand fully. And these other things, whether it's angles, I know riding in a helicopter, as an example, when that thing banks to make a turn and you're sitting in the door, you can actually see like under the helicopter, the horizon on the other side. And there's a version of almost being upside down, looking under the helicopter at things that are on the other side. And these angles are they're just not things that your brain fully can perceive or has the time to absorb and process. And so you're left with this feeling of, man, what the hell was that? And, it just, anyway.
Now, without getting into specifics, because I know you can, but in a broad sense, I have so much fun with this question. What's crazier, the things you actually did or the things you trained to do but were ultimately called off?
There were some crazy things that could have gone down that didn't happen, and those are, yeah, they're probably hairier situations, just in like a bigger, more strategic, if you look at it in a bigger picture. But Haiti is another example of something where less than a year after Mogadishu, I don't think most people know about this, but we were literally on planes. We had planes already in the air full of Rangers getting ready to invade Haiti in, I think it was September of '94. So we're back from Mogadishu, kind of like the hurt guys are getting fixed and new guys are showing up, and it was just kind of chaos all around. And in the middle of all of that, we decide, hey, we're going to go, not Rangers decided, but as a country, we decided we're going to go, try and solve this problem by putting Americans on the ground there. And the mission that we were assigned for that was pretty interesting, but we were going to get a combat jump. I was a jump master, already had, I don't think I had master wings yet, but yeah, I was going to be a jump master for one of the birds, the bird that I was on. And it would have been interesting to see how that played out,
And
So
they just recalled the planes?
So Jimmy Carter and someone else, I can't remember who, it may have been Colin Powell, like maybe he retired by that point, went down and were talking with, and I don't even remember the president of Haiti's name at the time, but they went down and were talking with him, trying to strike some sort of arrangement or agreement. And I don't even know what looking back, I don't even know what the conflict was about. we ended up deploying people there, not the Rangers, but special forces guys went in and were in Haiti for about a year or something like that. But the planes took off and Jimmy Carter and whomever this person was were still on the ground. And they were like, all right, stand down. My plane had fired up. Everybody was on the plane, JMPI'd, they're inspected, ready to go. The plane is firing up, getting ready to take off. And we got the word, stand down, 24-hour hold. So we're taking our, 100-pound rucksacks full of ammo and law rockets and everything else, and not turning everything back in, but de-rigging everything and okay, we'll do this again tomorrow and see what happens. And in the 24 hours, some sort of agreement was put together, and it didn't happen. But yeah, it was would have been interesting.
Well, definitely. I don't think I'd ever heard anything about that before. That's fascinating. Now, last time we spoke, we briefly touched on people who maybe play fast and loose with the truth with their military careers. And there have been some examples, I won't get into the specifics recently in the news, about maybe people saying less than honest things about their time in the service. And I'm curious for you as a veteran, when you hear people make claims about either flat out lies or say things like my entire career is classified, that's why you can't find proof of it, or maybe I think what you said, the ambiguity, it's like I'm going to dress a certain way in photos and kind of imply that I did things. What do you
Sure.
think when you see people do that?
Well, if it's people from the unit, like there are some well-known people that have posted things.
And by the way, you don't need to get into specific cases. I'm not asking you to flame someone. I'm just saying in a general
I
sense.
I'm like, I don't have time for hate, generally speaking. People send me stuff and they ask about this person or that person, and generally I'm like, I don't get involved in it. I don't want to be on the internet having drama with people or having some big fight over, this guy did this or this guy didn't this. I've seen people that served in other roles, kind of be ambiguous and post things that maybe leads people to believe that they served in another type of role. Generally, the stolen valor stuff that I've seen is people that actually served and that should take pride in what they did, but they want to be a part of something that maybe they wanted to do that. Maybe they didn't have the guts to try out for something. I don't know. I'm a person that, like, whether it was a cook, whether you're filling our cars with gas, like, everybody plays a role in the mission. And the operational portion of what special mission units do is like a pinprick on a timeline of here's everything that's got to happen for this thing to be successful. Literally, but it's also the one that gets all the glory. And so anytime I do something, talk on a podcast, or if I'm writing something, whatever it might be, I'll talk about those people, because without them, without support and everything else going the right way, intel, whatever it is, without all that, man, nothing else is successful. So I've never personally understood the need to, like, I didn't go to scuba school. Like, I didn't go. I'm not going to even think about attempting to wear a scuba bubble on my uniform. I've gotten called out for stuff online, whatever, dude, you don't know what you're talking about. But similarly, I don't want to get into a battle about it, but I don't understand that. I can understand from wanting to be a part of something. We had almost weekly, I get, somebody will DM me or somebody will text me, hey, met a guy that was in Mogadishu, and then I'll throw a name out. And it's like, no, man, like I've heard these names for 29 years. And even if they were a private in another platoon, like, and not to mention, and this is another one for anybody that wants to fake the whole Black Hawk Down thing, I've got the Valorous Unit Award orders that show everybody's name, rank, social. It shows the dates that they were in country, and it includes people that were headquarters people, people that were in personnel, not infantry or anything like that. Like, you are not on this list. You did not go. And, so somebody will tell me, like, I've had a federal agent who was like, my boss, here's his name. And as soon as I hear the name, I'm like, it's almost like you being the one to tell your buddy that his wife's having the affair, and all of a sudden you're the bad guy.
Yeah.
And I've literally had that happen where it's like, dude was like, well, he was there. I don't know what to tell you. Like, okay, I can just tell you that he wasn't there, but I don't care, man. It doesn't matter to me. There was a state trooper in Maryland that there was a picture, and somebody sent it to me and was like, hey, you know this guy? And I saw the name, I can read that. And I'm like, well, it doesn't ring a bell. Let me pull out the orders and I'll look. Then he's not on the orders, but he's being awarded something, and like having returned from some whatever it was, he's being awarded something from the Maryland State Police that's calling him out as a veteran of this, as a ranger, blah, 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 blah. I'm like, dude, that is insane,
Wait, did they actually go through with it and give him the award?
So I know people in the Maryland State Police, and I was like, dude, what's up with this guy? You know him? And I was like, I don't want to like call the guy out, and who do I talk to? There's nobody to really do anything about it. Like, I don't care. I'm not trying
Right,
to,
yeah.
I just want people to know, like, that's not real. And yeah.
Okay, I got two questions.
What are your thoughts on it?
Well, wow, I get asked the question. I'm not used to having the tables turned. Okay, so it really offends me when people just make up blatant lies about virtually anything, because you're insulting someone else's intelligence, number one. And two, I think it's an insecurity thing. So you think someone's so dumb that they can't do a basic Google search, right? And two, secure people don't lie about what they do. For example, I'm like a short white dude. I don't tell people I was a standout basketball player in high school. I was terrible. I averaged 2 points a game. But I know, probably even less, but I know people who I grew up with. We would go to college, and all of a sudden their like high school reality was totally different. And it's like, dude, we grew up together. I know none of this is true. When it comes to the military thing, I got burned really bad in an interview once, and I will tell you when I stopped recording this who it was. And so I felt like a jackass because I'm like, okay, I just interviewed this dude. I gave him a platform, and then I got messaged by a couple people and told years later by someone else, like, that was almost like 90% fiction. Like, that was just made up. Like, he might have deployed, but the rest of that story. And there's a specific story where I found someone who was actually there. And they're like, yeah, that guy got shot like that, but that dude wasn't even in the building. And he claimed to be the shooter, right? Um, I think it's unbelievably dumb. I think when politicians do it, you have to be next level dumb to be a politician and do it. And I'll tell you why. If I go out at a bar and I tell I have a girlfriend, but let's say I was a scumbag and I was cheating, and I told some woman, like, oh, I was in the army, I was an army ranger, she probably has no way to vet that. There's a 99% chance she has no way to vet that. As soon as you're a politician and you say, I did X, Y, and Z and all these top secret missions in Afghanistan, reporters, the first thing they're going to do, because it's literally their job, they're going to find your unit. They're going to start making calls to anyone publicly available. They're going to call the commanding officer at the time, headquarters. They're going to get all your military files. And if your response to that is, well, my whole career is classified, you just look like an asshole. Like, I don't know what else to say other than that. And I had a family member that served in a really important role in Vietnam, and he doesn't. It's not even discussed. But it's the same thing. It's like I spoke to a guy from your old team, and he was like, I've heard a million people say they went to Vietnam and every single one of them was a war hero. Like, every single one of them apparently killed like 100 people. It's like, the math doesn't work out that way. The math does not work. So that would be my thoughts on it. I think it's a scumbag thing to do. And I think it's just a scumbag thing to do. And it's civilians, it's hard for you to fact check it unless you run for office and you inherently bring so much attention to you. I don't know if you remember this. I texted you like 8 months ago and I was like, hey, this guy's claiming to be an Army Ranger and he doesn't appear to be. He appears to have served in a different unit. And you kind of gave me an explanation of, well, he went to Ranger school, but he's playing kind of maybe fast and loose with what he's saying. So that'd be my thoughts. I will tell you who that was when I don't want to start a huge
Yeah,
war.
for sure. I think that there's a component to things where, it's basically proven our memories are all jacked up and our brain starts to interpret things. I know that as an example, when it comes to talking about music things or things from my past in music, I can get into a 20-minute explanation of what that was, but generally speaking, like we're doing an interview, we're not spending 20 minutes on every background. So I gloss over things. None of it's a lie, but it's also like I've got talking points, or I've got to move through these things. I think politicians specifically, they're on repeat, and it's like, oh, play up this, and at some point their brain starts to believe everything that they've said, and like, where does fact leave fiction? All of that, in your brain starting to repeat this thing over again, and you're to some degree almost believing it. And like I remember landing under sniper fire.
Yeah, I know exactly what you're referencing.
Meanwhile, it's like,
Yeah.
literally, there are all kinds of different examples, but I've just personally never really understood it. I've seen it firsthand from guys serving, where it's like they wanted to be a part of this thing. Maybe they came a little after the fact, and it's just kind of easy to, hey, remember when? I was like, you weren't there for that. But anyway, generally speaking, I got no time for hate. And most of the people that are stolen valor, if you want to just put all that under one category, most of them aren't people that never served. Most of them are people that served in some capacity, but they just do a little embellishing. And next thing you know, is like, well, did you get this award? So I mentioned the project, and I talked about, having to feel ashamed at a 50-something-year-old who has gotten multiple valorous awards since then. And, it's like an avoidance of that. So rather than feel the shame of not being upgraded, even though I shouldn't feel ashamed about that, I'm just going to go ahead and say, yeah, I got upgraded. Right. And
yeah.
So I feel it. I shouldn't feel it, and I guess a way of not making yourself feel that, I don't know. There's more of a psychology there to the whole situation than just, or a person that posts a photo of themselves. It's like, well, were you an SF when you took this picture, or were you a support guy when you took this picture?
Right.
Because and you're using terminology down here that like you weren't here when I don't know. So it's, yeah, whatever.
We got two questions left, and we'll I asked you one of these questions last time, and I did a poor job of framing it. I gave you an easy out. I asked you, in 20 years, what do you want to be remembered for? And you said, I hope I'm remembered for whatever I'm doing in my 70s. That would be what I would hope I'm doing in that moment. So I'm going to rephrase it. There's not going to be an easy out this time. When Brad Thomas is no longer here, when I'm no longer here, in 100 years, if someone picks up a book or finds an encyclopedia page and it says, here's the 2 or 3 sentences that define who Brad Thomas was, what do you want it to be? Is it you were a great husband and father, you were proud of your military career, you loved music? Like, when you're not here, so you can't say, well, what I'm doing at the time, when you're finally gone, as we all will be, what will have been the legacy you hope to have left behind?
I'm still gonna find the loophole in your question. So I can't define yet what I'm going to do in my 60s, 70s, 80s. So therefore, I can't necessarily say that this is what I want to be remembered for. I'm still a person that, like, the good days are in front of me. They're not behind me.
I like that attitude.
And so I find it really hard. Like, I didn't want Mogadishu to be my defining moment. I didn't want that to be like, well, I did that, now I can take the easy road on everything else. I didn't want that to be that. So I don't want the fact that I was in Delta to be the thing that I was remembered for. I don't want it to be, I feel like people are so more dimensional than, an occupation or something that they did or a part of something historical. I would venture to say that like firemen from September 11th is like, I was there that day. The towers came down, I'm covered in debris. I lost, a bunch of friends, but like, what are you going to talk about that forever and a day? I don't want that. I don't want that to be me.
So do you,
So I feel like I still am accomplishing things. I'm still doing things. Maybe I'll cure cancer in 20 years and be remembered for that,
can I ask you a sub question to that? Because I like the point you just said about like it happened to them, but that was just one day they moved. When you see someone, or if something traumatic happens to you and you can't let it go, like what advice do you have for someone who just can't move on to the next thing? Like there's always tomorrow, but some people, whether there's military people, journalists, sports people, whatever, some people get caught in a moment and they can never let it go. Do you have any advice for how to just, hey, sun's coming up tomorrow, here's what you got to do?
I think that, everybody has a different psychology. And I think that people that are successful at, again, not being defined by one specific incident or one moment in time. I don't know. It's like you're all of this for there are 24 hours in a day. Like, I'm not going to be defined by what happened for 30 seconds in that 24 hours. I've heard that argument used in a case of murder where the defense attorney said, are we going to judge her for 3 total hours that she killed 7 people? When she's literally lived 20,000, hours in her life so far. Like, I guess it kind of is to some degree like that logic, but I don't know.
Well, Brad, I want to thank you for coming on American Joyride. It is always a pleasure to talk to you. You are a fascinating dude. And for everyone listening to this, remember, we can find Silence on Light on Apple Music, Spotify, YouTube, Amazon. Just go on Google. It's there. Brad, you are welcome back, just like I said last time, anytime you want. And I tell you what, when your project comes out, I expect to see you back here to promote the hell out of it. All right.
Absolutely. No, I appreciate it, man.
Have a good one.